Arizona Territory, 1887. The unrelenting summer sun beat down on the dusty main street of Copper Springs as Samuel "Sam" Morrison rode into town, his collar damp with sweat and his thoughts as parched as the land around him. At 25, he'd already seen enough of the West to know it wasn't a place that rewarded sentimentality. 6 years of driving cattle, dodging bullets, and sleeping under stars that remained coldly distant had hardened him like the leather of his well-worn saddle. A man out here needs nothing but his horse, his gun, and enough sense to keep both, his father had told him before consumption took him 3 winters past. Sam had taken those words to heart, wrapping them around himself like armor. The West was no place for attachment. Everyone he'd ever seen succumb to it ended up with nothing but heartache or worse, a shallow grave. Better to keep moving, keep working, and keep your feelings buried deeper than a prairie dog's warren. Sam dismounted outside the Copper Springs Hotel, his lean frame casting a long shadow across the boardwalk. His face, handsome despite the thin layer of trail dust, revealed little of the turmoil beneath. At 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and eyes the color of a summer storm, he drew glances from the few ladies who happened to be out in the midday heat. He nodded politely but kept his distance. Getting tangled up with womenfolk was a complication he couldn't afford, not when he was due at the Morrison ranch by month's end to help his brother with the cattle drive to Colorado. "Room for the night," he told the hotel clerk, sliding across coins that represented 2 days of hard work at his last job, and information on where I might find work for a week or so. The clerk, a balding man with spectacles perched on a bulbous nose, studied him briefly. "Might try the Jernigan place, heard they're looking for hands, though I'd steer clear if I were you." Sam's interest piqued despite himself. "Why's that?" "Old man Jernigan passed last winter. Place is run by his daughter now. Beautiful as a sunrise, that one, but about as approachable as a rattlesnake with a toothache. Men go to work there, but they don't tend to stay long." Sam nodded, filing away the information. A difficult employer wasn't anything new, and he needed the money. His saddle bags were light, and the Morrison ranch was still a good journey away. "Where's the Jernigan spread?" 5 miles north. "Can't miss it, got the only 2-story house in the county." Sam settled into his room, washed the dust from his face and neck, and changed into his cleanest shirt. His reflection in the small, spotted mirror showed a young man with sandy blonde hair in need of a trim and blue-gray eyes that had seen too much for their years. The light stubble on his jaw reminded him he'd need a proper shave before seeking employment, but that could wait till morning. As he made his way down to the hotel dining room, the sound of raised voices caught his attention. A woman's voice, clear and firm despite its evident frustration, rose above the usual tavern murmur. "I said I'll handle it myself, Mr. Daniels. I don't need your charity or your opinions on how to run my ranch." Sam paused at the doorway, his eyes finding the source of the commotion. Standing with her back straight as a fence post was a young woman whose presence seemed to command the room. Her dress was practical, a riding skirt of deep blue and a crisp white blouse, but there was nothing plain about her. Golden blonde hair was pinned back from a face that could have graced the finest painting in any Eastern gallery. She couldn't have been more than 22, yet she faced down the red-faced man before her with the confidence of someone twice her age. "Miss Jernigan," the man spluttered, "your father would never." "My father is gone," she cut him off, those words delivered with such finality that even Sam, a stranger to the situation, felt their weight. "And I'm quite capable of determining what needs to be done." Grace Jernigan, it had to be. The clerk's description hadn't done her justice, Sam thought, watching as she turned away from the flustered man. Her eyes, a startling green like spring grass after rain, briefly met Sam's as she moved toward the door. There was something in that gaze, determination mixed with a flash of vulnerability so quick he might have imagined it, that caught him off guard. She passed by without acknowledgement, the light floral scent of her perfume lingering in the air like a question Sam hadn't meant to ask. The next morning found Sam riding toward the Jernigan ranch, following the clerk's directions. The 2-story house appeared on the horizon just as promised, white-painted wood stark against the ruddy landscape. As he approached, he noted the barn needed repairs, the corral fence had several broken rails, and the windmill was turning erratically. The place wasn't falling apart, but it showed signs of being understaffed. A young man mucking out the stable paused as Sam rode up, Help you, mister? He asked, leaning on his pitchfork. Heard Miss Jernigan might be hiring. The stable hand looked Sam up and down, then jerked his head toward the house. She's in there. Fair warning, she's been in a mood since yesterday. Sam dismounted, removed his hat, and ran a hand through his hair before approaching the house. The front door opened before he could knock, revealing Grace Jernigan herself. Up close, he could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose and the way her hair caught the sunlight, turning it to spun gold. You're either lost or looking for work, she said without preamble, and judging by those capable hands and the way you sit a horse, I'm guessing it's the latter. Sam nodded, momentarily taken aback by her directness. Yes, ma'am. Sam Morrison, I heard you might need help around the place. Her eyes narrowed slightly, assessing him with a businesslike efficiency that made him feel as though she could see right through to his intentions. Can you mend fence, break horses, and keep your opinions to yourself, mister? Morrison. Yes to all three, Miss Jernigan. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Then you're hired, provided you understand two things. First, I pay fair wages for fair work. Second, I run this ranch. Not my foreman, not the bank, and certainly not any hand I employ. Is that clear? Crystal clear, Sam replied, finding himself intrigued despite his better judgment. This was just a job, a means to earn enough money to continue his journey. Getting involved in whatever complications surrounded Grace Jernigan and her ranch wouldn't serve him well. Good. You can put your horse in the stable and take the room at the end of the bunkhouse. We start at dawn tomorrow. With that, she turned and went back inside, leaving Sam with the distinct impression that while he may have gotten the job, Grace Jernigan had just set the terms for a battle he hadn't realized he'd entered. The first few days at the Jernigan ranch fell into a rhythm. Sam worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, helping with the cattle, and making himself useful wherever needed. He observed Grace from a distance, noting how she rode out each morning to check the property, how she kept the account books meticulously, and how the ranch hands respected her, even if some of the older ones did so grudgingly. What puzzled him was the trunk, a large, brass-bound affair that had arrived by stagecoach his second day there. Grace had ordered it taken to her father's study, and no one had been allowed inside since. Twice a day she would lock herself in with it, emerging each time with a tighter expression and occasionally reddened eyes. What's in the trunk? Sam finally asked Pete, the stable hand who'd greeted him on his arrival. Pete shrugged. No idea. But whatever it is has her spooked. Found her burning papers the other night behind the house. When she saw me watching, looked like she'd seen a ghost. Sam's curiosity was piqued, but he reminded himself it wasn't his business. He'd be gone in a week, 2 at most. Grace Jernigan's secrets, whatever they were, would remain her own. That resolve lasted until the night of the storm. A savage spring thunderstorm swept across the territory, driving everyone indoors. Sam had just finished securing the horses when a flash of lightning illuminated a figure stumbling toward the house from the direction of town. Without thinking, he ran through the downpour, reaching Grace just as she nearly collapsed in the mud. Miss Jernigan, he shouted over the wind, catching her arm. Her riding clothes were soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. What in God's name are you doing out in this? Had to get to Copper Springs and back, she gasped, allowing him to support her toward the house. Needed to send a telegram. In this weather, it couldn't wait. Her green eyes flashed with something like fear. No, it couldn't. Inside the house, Sam helped her to a chair near the fireplace. The housekeepers had already retired for the night, and they were alone in the large front room. Grace shivered violently, her lips tinged blue. You need to get out of those wet clothes, Sam said, keeping his voice professional despite the impropriety of the situation. I'll build up the fire and find you a blanket. To his surprise, she nodded without argument, a testament to how cold she must have been. There's a quilt in the chest by the window. I'll change in my father's study. Sam stoked the fire to blazing and found the quilt, a beautiful handmade piece in blue and white. When Grace hadn't returned after 10 minutes, concern overrode propriety, and he knocked softly on the study door. Miss Jernigan, are you all right? Silence, then a muffled sound that might have been a sob. I'm coming in, he warned, turning the knob. The door was unlocked. The study was dimly lit by a single lamp. Grace stood by her father's desk wearing a simple house dress, her wet clothes discarded on a chair. But it wasn't her changed attire that caught Sam's attention. It was her face, pale with shock, and the open trunk on the floor beside her. Papers were scattered across the desk, and in Grace's trembling hand was a folded document, the wax seal broken. As Sam entered, she looked up, her eyes wild with a mixture of fear and anger. "They're going to take it all," she whispered. "Everything my father built, everything he left me." Sam closed the door behind him, instinctively knowing that whatever was happening, it wasn't for the rest of the ranch to witness. "What are you talking about?" "Debts, loans I never knew about," she gestured helplessly at the papers. "My father borrowed against the ranch to invest in a silver mine. The mine failed. Now the bank in Prescott is calling in the note, $50,000 by the end of the month, or they take everything." The sum was staggering. Sam had never seen that much money in his life, let alone held it. "There has to be something that can be done." Grace laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "Do you have $50,000, Mr. Morrison? Because unless you do, I don't see many options." She sank into her father's chair, the fight seeming to drain out of her. "I thought I could save it. I've been trying for months, ever since I found the first letter. Selling cattle, cutting expenses, even considering selling the east pasture. But it's not enough." "Nothing's enough." Sam moved closer, drawn by her vulnerability in a way that surprised him. "The trunk, that's where you found all this." She nodded. "It arrived from my father's lawyer in San Francisco. He died last month, and his clerk found these papers in his safe. Apparently my father made him promise not to send them until," her voice broke, "until he'd been gone a year. I suppose he thought he'd have solved the problem by then." Sam knelt beside the chair, not touching her but close enough to offer support. "Miss Jernigan, Grace, I'm sorry, truly." For a moment she looked at him with such raw emotion that Sam felt something shift inside him, some wall beginning to crumble. Then she straightened, her composure returning like a mask sliding back into place. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Morrison, but this isn't your burden. I'll find a way." She stood, gathering the papers with hands that had steadied. "Please don't mention what you've seen to anyone. The last thing I need is for word to spread that the Jernigan Ranch is in trouble. Every vulture in the territory would descend." Sam rose as well, recognizing the dismissal but reluctant to leave her alone with such crushing news. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Her smile was small but genuine, the first real one he'd seen from her. "You already have, by not telling me it's going to be all right when we both know it isn't." She moved toward the door. "Get some rest, Sam. There's work to be done tomorrow, regardless of what the future holds." That night, lying in his bunk as rain pounded the roof, Sam couldn't stop thinking about Grace Jernigan. About the weight she carried alone, the pride that kept her fighting even when defeat seemed certain. About the way his name had sounded when she'd finally used it, soft and unguarded in that brief moment of connection. He told himself it was compassion, nothing more, that he'd feel the same for anyone facing such circumstances, but deep down he knew it was a lie. Grace Jernigan had gotten under his skin, and for the first time in years, Sam Morrison was beginning to question whether his father's advice about keeping his distance was truly the only way to survive in the West. The next week brought clear skies and a frenetic energy to the Jernigan Ranch. Grace drove herself and her workers harder than ever, rising before dawn and often continuing long after the sun had set. Sam found himself volunteering for extra tasks, staying late to help with the accounts, anything to lighten her load. The more time they spent together, the more he saw beyond the tough exterior she presented to the world. She was intelligent, with a quick wit that surfaced when she allowed herself to relax. She knew every inch of the ranch and could ride as well as any man Sam had ever seen. And beneath her businesslike manner lay a passion for the land that matched his own buried love for wide-open spaces. "Why do you keep moving?" she asked him one evening as they sat on the porch after the others had retired, reviewing cattle counts for a possible sale. "Pete says you never stay anywhere long." Sam considered the question, surprised to find himself wanting to give her an honest answer rather than the easy deflection he usually offered. "My father believed attachments were dangerous out here. That a man survived by staying free, unencumbered." He looked out at the darkened landscape. "After he died, it seemed easiest to keep moving. Staying meant risking loss again." Grace was quiet for a moment. My father believed the opposite, she finally said, that this land, this life was worth any risk, worth fighting for even when the odds were impossible. Her voice softened. I'm not sure either of them got it completely right. Their eyes met in the lantern light, and Sam felt something dangerous and wonderful unfurling in his chest. Before he could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the distance, and they both turned to see a rider approaching at speed despite the late hour. The messenger brought a telegram from the bank in Prescott. Sam watched Grace's face pale as she read it, her hands crinkling the paper's edges. They've moved up the deadline, she said, her voice unnaturally calm. 2 weeks instead of a month. Someone's pressuring them, someone who wants this land. Who would want it badly enough to manipulate the bank? Sam asked. Grace's eyes hardened. Ethan Daniels. He's been trying to buy the surrounding properties for years. His cattle operation needs water rights, and our creek is the only reliable source in the dry months. She crumpled the telegram. He was arguing with me at the hotel the day you arrived, offering to help me manage the ranch for a controlling interest, of course. Sam remembered the red-faced man, the confrontation he'd witnessed. He knows about the debt. He must. Banking circles are small out here. Grace paced the porch. This changes everything. 2 weeks isn't enough time to arrange even a fraction of what I need. In that moment, Sam made a decision that went against everything his father had taught him, everything he'd believed about keeping his distance. We'll find a way, he said firmly, together. Grace looked at him, surprise and something warmer flickering in her eyes. Why would you help me? You barely know me, and this isn't your fight. Sam stepped closer, drawn by an impulse he couldn't name. Maybe I'm tired of not fighting for anything. Maybe some things, some people are worth the risk. For a breathless moment, they stood close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could feel the warmth radiating between them. Then Grace stepped back, her expression conflicted. I appreciate the sentiment, Sam, but sentiment won't save my ranch. We need a miracle or $50,000. As she turned to go inside, Sam caught her hand, surprising them both. Grace, let me help, please. She looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. All right, she said softly, but don't make promises you can't keep. I've had enough broken promises to last a lifetime. The next morning, Sam rode into Copper Springs with a purpose. If Grace couldn't raise the money through conventional means, perhaps there were unconventional solutions. His first stop was the bank, where he learned that while small loans were available, nothing approaching the scale they needed was possible without substantial collateral. His second stop was the telegraph office, where he sent messages to his brother at the Morrison ranch and to a former employer in Tucson who owed him a favor. It was at the saloon, where he'd stopped for a quick meal, that he overheard a conversation that changed everything. Daniels ain't playing fair, a grizzled prospector was saying to his companion. Damming up tributaries, redirecting water from smaller spreads, man's determined to control every drop in the county. Heard he's got his eye on the Jernigan place now, the other man replied. Shame about that girl, pretty thing, but she's in over her head. You ain't heard the half of it, the prospector leaned in, lowering his voice, though not enough to prevent Sam from catching his words. My cousin works for the Assier's office. That silver mine old Jernigan invested in wasn't dry at all. Daniels paid the original Assier to falsify reports, then bought out the claim for pennies once Jernigan was ruined. There's a fortune in that mountain, and nobody knows it, except Daniels and his partners. Sam's blood ran cold. If what the man was saying was true, Daniels hadn't just taken advantage of the situation, he'd created it, deliberately ruining Grace's father to get at the ranch. He was halfway to his horse when a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. Turning, he found himself face to face with Ethan Daniels himself, flanked by 2 rough-looking men. Morrison, isn't it? Daniels smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. Heard you're working for the Jernigan girl. Admirable, helping a young woman in her time of need. Sam kept his face neutral, though his hands itched to form fists. Miss Jernigan runs a good operation. I'm lucky she hired me. Daniels chuckled. I'm sure. Thing is, that good operation won't be hers much longer. Smart man would be looking for new employment. He leaned closer. I'm always hiring. Pay better than she can afford to these days. I'm happy where I am, Sam replied evenly, stepping back. Daniels shrugged. Suit yourself. Just don't get too comfortable, change is coming to Copper Springs. With a nod to his men, he turned and walked toward the bank, confidence in every step. Sam watched him go, a plan forming in his mind. He had 2 weeks to prove what Daniels had done, to find evidence of the fraud that had brought Grace's family to ruin. It was a slim chance, but it was the only one they had. When he returned to the ranch, he found Grace in the study, poring over the papers from the trunk once again, searching for any solution she might have missed. He closed the door behind him and told her everything he'd overheard. Fraud, Grace's voice shook with anger. He deliberately ruined my father for this land. That's what it sounds like, Sam replied. If we can prove it, if we can find evidence in those papers or from the Asir or from the mine itself, we could challenge the debt. At the very least, it would buy you time. Hope flared in Grace's eyes for the first time in days. The original Asir's reports should be here somewhere. She began rifling through the trunk with renewed purpose. Father kept everything related to his investments. They worked through the night, sorting papers, reading contracts, building a case. As dawn broke, Grace held up a document triumphantly. Here, the original mineral survey from the Silverhill mine. Father paid for independent testing before investing. She scanned the paper. It shows extensive silver deposits, just as he believed. If we can find the later report, the one that claimed the mine was worthless. We can prove the fraud, Sam finished, but that report would be with the mining company records, not your father's papers. Grace's shoulders slumped slightly, then straightened with determination. Then we need to get those records. The mining company office was in Prescott, where the bank is. We'll have to go there. It's not that simple, Sam cautioned. Daniels has partners, connections. If we start asking questions openly, he'll know what we're doing. Then we won't ask openly. Grace stood, a new fire in her eyes. I have an idea, but it's risky. I'll need you to trust me. I do, Sam said, realizing as the words left his mouth that they were true. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, Grace Jernigan had become someone he believed in, someone he would fight for. The walls he'd built around himself were crumbling, and for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of what might follow. Grace's plan was audacious. She would travel to Prescott under the pretense of negotiating terms with the bank, drawing Daniel's attention and resources. Meanwhile, Sam would access the mining company records, searching for evidence of the fraudulent report. The clerk at the mining office is Joshua Fisher, Grace explained as they prepared to leave 2 days later. He was sweet on me once before Father's troubles began. If anyone will help us without raising alarms, it's him. Sam felt an unexpected pang of jealousy at the mention of another man's interest in Grace, but he pushed it aside. What mattered was saving the ranch, not his newly discovered feelings. They rode into Prescott separately, Grace taking a room at the Grand Hotel near the bank, Sam finding more modest accommodations closer to the mining district. They had 3 days before the debt came due, 3 days to find proof of a fraud that had happened nearly 2 years ago. Grace met with the bankers the first morning, arguing for an extension and presenting a plan for repayment that they all knew was impossible. As she predicted, Daniels appeared at the bank within hours, smooth and solicitous, offering to help negotiate a solution that would allow her to keep a small portion of the ranch while he assumed control of the rest. While Grace kept Daniels occupied with feigned consideration of his offer, Sam made his way to the mining company office. Joshua Fisher proved to be exactly as Grace had described, eager to help her, even indirectly and discreetly cynical about his employers. The Silverhill records, he repeated when Sam asked. Those would be in the archive room, not much call for them these days since the operation shut down. I heard it failed, Sam probed carefully. No silver to be found. Fisher's expression grew guarded. That's the official story. Can't say more than that, not if I want to keep my position. What if you could help Grace Jernigan save her father's legacy? Sam asked quietly. Would that be worth the risk? The clerk studied him for a long moment. You care for her, he finally said. It wasn't a question. Sam didn't deny it. I do, and she deserves better than what Daniels is trying to do to her. Fisher nodded slowly. Come back after closing. I'll let you in the back way. The records you want, they exist. Whether they'll be enough, I can't say. That night, under cover of darkness, Sam searched through dusty files in the mining company's archive room. Fisher had given him a lantern and specific directions to the Silverhill records. What he found confirmed their suspicions, and worse, not only had the Asir been paid to falsify reports, but Daniels had been using Grace's father's water rights illegally for over a year, diverting creek water to his own properties through hidden channels. The evidence was damning, but scattered across multiple documents. Sam carefully copied what he needed, then slipped out the way he'd come. Fisher was waiting, his face tense. "Did you find it?" Sam nodded. "More than I expected, thank you." Fisher shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. Daniels has the bank president in his pocket and half the territorial judge's bench besides. Evidence only matters if someone's willing to hear it." It was a sobering reminder of the forces aligned against them. Sam made his way back to his boarding house, planning to meet Grace at their agreed rendezvous point the next morning. But when dawn came, Grace didn't appear at the small cafe on the edge of town. After an hour of growing concern, Sam made his way to her hotel. The clerk at the desk informed him that Miss Jernigan had checked out early that morning, accompanied by Mr. Daniels and his associates. "Left in quite a hurry," the clerk added, "mentioned something about returning to Copper Springs to finalize arrangements." Alarm coursed through Sam. It made no sense for Grace to leave without contacting him, especially not with Daniels. Something was wrong, very wrong. He rode hard back to Copper Springs, pushing his horse to its limits. The Jernigan ranch was quiet when he arrived, too quiet. Pete emerged from the stable, his face grim. "She came back with Daniels and his men," the stable hand reported. "Went straight to the house. Nobody's come out since. The other hands were told to clear out till tomorrow, said she was signing over the property and didn't want an audience." Sam's hand went to his gun instinctively. "How many men with Daniels?" "3 that I saw, all armed." 4 against 1, not good odds, but Sam wasn't about to wait for reinforcements that might never come. "Keep everyone away from the house," he instructed Pete. "This isn't going to be a legal transfer, it's going to be a robbery or worse." Moving carefully, Sam approached the house from the back, using the gathering dusk as cover. Through a window he could see into the study, Grace seated at her father's desk, Daniels standing over her, papers spread between them. She looked pale but composed, though Sam could see the tension in her shoulders. 2 men stood by the door while a third was visible just inside the front room. Getting in unseen would be nearly impossible, but there was a cellar entrance, a storm door that led to the storage space beneath the house. If it was unlocked, he might have a chance. Fortune favored him. The storm door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Sam slipped into the darkness below the house, feeling his way through root cellars and storage rooms until he found the narrow stairs that led up to the kitchen pantry. Inside the house, he could hear voices more clearly, Daniels, smooth and satisfied, Grace's, tight with suppressed emotion. "Just sign the deed transfer, Miss Jernigan, and this unpleasantness will be over. You can keep the house itself and 10 acres around it, more than generous considering your situation." "And if I refuse," Grace's voice was steady despite everything, a harsh laugh. "Then the bank takes everything tomorrow and you get nothing. Your choice, a home or the streets. Not a difficult decision for a sensible woman." Sam edged closer to the study, staying out of sight. Through a crack in the door, he could see Grace's hand hovering over the paper, a pen clutched tightly in her fingers. Her eyes flicked toward the trunk, still open beside the desk, then back to Daniels. "Before I sign, I want to know one thing," she said. "The mine, did you know it wasn't dry when you bought it from my father?" Daniels stiffened, then relaxed into a cold smile. "Clever girl, I wondered if you'd figure it out." "Yes, the Silverhill is producing quite nicely these days. Your father was too trusting, a fatal flaw in business, one I hope you've learned to avoid." "And the water, have you been diverting it from our creek?" "Insurance," Daniels shrugged. "I needed your land, weak, vulnerable. Cattle need water to thrive after all." He leaned closer. "Now stop stalling and sign. My patience isn't endless." Grace met his gaze unflinchingly. "No." The word hung in the air between them, simple and defiant. Daniel's face darkened. "No, perhaps I haven't made the stakes clear enough." He nodded to one of his men who stepped forward menacingly. "Your signature or consequences you won't enjoy." Sam had heard enough. Slipping his gun from its holster, he burst through the door, taking all of them by surprise. "Step away from her, Daniels." The room froze for an instant. Daniels half-turned, his face contorted with shock. Grace's eyes widening with relief and fear, the gunmen reaching for their weapons. Then everything happened at once. Sam fired first, hitting the nearest gunman in the shoulder. Grace dove beneath the desk as Daniels bellowed orders. The second man got a shot off that splintered the doorframe inches from Sam's head. Sam returned fire, catching him in the leg. Daniels himself had drawn a small derringer, aiming not at Sam but at Grace, who had emerged from behind the desk with a revolver of her own, her father's service pistol from the cavalry days. "Drop it, Morrison," Daniels snarled, "or she dies right now." Sam hesitated, his gun still trained on the third gunman. Grace's eyes met his across the chaos of the room, and something passed between them: trust, determination, a silent agreement. "You won't shoot me, Daniels," Grace said calmly, her own weapon steady in her hands. "You need my signature too badly, and even if you did, Sam has proof of what you did to my father. Proof that's already been sent to the territorial marshal in Tucson." It was a bluff. They hadn't had time to send the evidence anywhere, but Daniel's face showed uncertainty for the first time. "You're lying," he said, though with less conviction. "The fraudulent Assier's report, the illegal water diversion. The witnesses who'll testify you threatened me today." Grace's voice grew stronger with each word. "Kill us, and you'll hang before the month is out." The third gunman, seeing Daniel's resolve waver, made a break for the door. Sam let him go, one less threat to deal with. The other two were wounded, disarmed, no longer immediate dangers. "It's over, Daniels," Sam said quietly. "Put the gun down." For a terrible moment, it seemed Daniels might choose violence over surrender. His finger tightened on the trigger, his face twisted with thwarted rage. Then slowly, he lowered the derringer. "This isn't over," he spat. "You have no proof that will stand in court. It's my word against yours, a respected businessman versus a drifter and a desperate woman about to lose everything." Grace stepped forward, the trunk at her feet. "That's where you're wrong." She reached into the trunk and withdrew a small leather book. "My father's journal, every meeting, every transaction, every suspicion he had about you and your partners. He knew something wasn't right even at the end." Her voice caught. "He just couldn't prove it in time." The journal was the final piece, the connection that would give credibility to the evidence Sam had gathered. Daniels seemed to deflate before their eyes, his confident facade crumbling as he realized how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. When the sheriff arrived, summoned by Pete who'd heard the gunshots, they presented their case. The wounded men were taken to the doctor, Daniels to the jail. By midnight, telegrams had been sent to the territorial authorities, and Grace had received preliminary assurances that her debt would be reviewed in light of the fraud allegations. It wasn't a complete victory. There would be courts and lawyers and battles ahead, but the immediate threat had passed. The Jernigan ranch would remain in Grace's hands for now. After everyone had gone, after the statements had been given and the house had quieted, Sam found Grace on the porch, staring out at her land in the moonlight. She turned as he approached, her face showing the fatigue of the day but also something lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. "You saved my home," she said simply. "I don't know how to thank you." Sam shook his head, moving to stand beside her. "You saved it yourself. You refused to give in, even with a gun pointed at you." "That kind of courage," he trailed off, the words inadequate for what he wanted to express. Grace smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile he'd seen from her. "We saved it together." "That's the truth of it." She hesitated, then added softly, "I never expected you. When you rode up that day, I thought you were just another drifter passing through, another person who would leave." "I thought so too," Sam admitted. "I never planned to stay, never planned to care." And now, her question hung in the night air between them, full of possibility. Sam took her hand, marveling at how right it felt in his. "Now I'm reconsidering my father's advice about attachments. He was wrong about a lot of things, it seems." Grace's fingers tightened around his. "My father was too, in his way. He thought he had to solve everything alone, bear every burden himself. If he'd trusted others, trusted me, with the truth about the mine, about Daniels, things might have been different." "We don't have to repeat their mistakes," Sam said, drawing her closer. In the silver moonlight, her eyes reflected the stars, bright with hope and something more. "Some things are worth the risk, worth fighting for." "Is that what I am to you, a risk?" There was vulnerability in the question, but no fear. Sam's answer was to close the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Grace responded with a passion that matched his own, her arms encircling his neck, drawing him deeper into the embrace. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "Not a risk," he murmured. "A certainty, the only one I've ever known." Grace laughed softly, the sound full of joy and wonder. "Sam Morrison, are you saying you've fallen in love with me over a land dispute and a trunk full of old papers?" "I'm saying I've fallen in love with your courage, your determination, your heart," he replied, brushing a strand of golden hair from her face. "The land dispute just gave me the excuse to stay long enough to discover it." Her smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Then I suppose I should thank my father for that trunk after all. For all the trouble it also brought you." "You asked me not to open it," Sam reminded her, his tone teasing. "That first night when I found you in the study, you said it wasn't my burden." Grace's expression grew serious. "And you said we'd find a way together. That was the moment I began to hope again, not just for the ranch, but for myself." They stood together on the porch of the home Grace had fought so hard to keep, the future spreading before them like the vast Arizona sky, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges ahead, the legal battle with Daniels, rebuilding the ranch, forging a life together, but facing them no longer seemed impossible. "Stay," Grace whispered, the word both question and invitation. "Not just for now, not just until the next cattle drive or the next horizon. Stay for good." Sam's answer was in his kiss, in the arms that held her close as if he'd never let go, in the heart that had finally found its home after years of restless wandering. "For good," he promised against her lips, "for all the days to come." 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Grace Jernigan became Grace Morrison in a ceremony beneath the oak tree behind the ranch house. The bank loan had been forgiven in light of Daniel's fraud, the mine's shares returned to Grace as her rightful inheritance. The Jernigan-Morrison ranch was flourishing, with new cattle, repaired fences, and clear, unobstructed water flowing from the creek. Sam stood beside his bride, scarcely able to believe how completely his life had transformed. His brother had come from the Morrison ranch to stand with him, bringing words of congratulation and promises of partnership between their properties. Friends from Copper Springs and neighboring ranches gathered to celebrate not just a wedding, but Grace's triumph over those who had sought to take her birthright. As they spoke their vows beneath the golden leaves of the oak, Sam thought of his father's warnings about attachments, about the dangers of putting down roots in the unforgiving West. He had been wrong, as fathers sometimes are. The frontier wasn't just a place of hardship and loss, it was also a place where love could take hold and flourish, where a man and woman could build something lasting together. Grace looked up at him, radiant in her mother's wedding dress, her green eyes full of the future they would share. "No regrets?" she asked softly. Sam drew her into his arms, his heart fuller than he had ever imagined possible. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." Around them, the land stretched out in every direction, no longer a wilderness to pass through, but a home to cherish. And as the sun set on their wedding day, casting long golden shadows across the property that had brought them together, Sam and Grace Morrison stood at the threshold of a life neither had dared to dream of. A life built on trust, courage, and the love that had begun with a mysterious trunk and the woman who had asked him not to open it.